All right, we're taping this Tuesday afternoon. Peter Schrager is here. You see him on Good Morning Football. He's going to be on the Fox NFL coverage. He just did Flying Coach Season 2 with Sean McVay. Critically acclaimed. What, 8 coaches appeared on that pod?
We did 8 head coaches. We did 1 defensive coordinator, Raheem Morris, and then we had a 2-parter with Troy Aikman, which, Bill, was my favorite. Oh, Aikman, just completely unfiltered. I loved it. Yeah. It was great.
Who knew? Yeah, and then McVay planted the seeds for if he ever wants to go into media, it'll be an easy jump for him. We have football coming.
Oh, my God.
I don't know if you heard.
Let's go.
I did all my homework. I was in Hawaii. I have this whole process. I was telling you before we went on, you kind of have to relearn the league. But you're going to be coming on the podcast on Thursday. So we're going to be doing $1 Million Picks coming off just an incredibly successful run that we had that America's still talking about all these months later. They're just like, were you there? Remember when? We talk about this 30 years from now.
Man walking on the moon.
Yeah. We'll try to keep it going. We're going to talk today on today's pod just because this is the perfect time to talk about stuff like who's going to win the Super Bowl? Who are the sleepers? Whose win-loss total is way too low? Things like that. And I'm going to start here. I have a theory that carefully crafted from the mid-2000s that basically in the NFL, every year, somewhere between 6 to 8 teams really could have won the Super Bowl, right? And it's somewhere in that range. Sometimes the right team wins. Sometimes we have those seasons where it's like a couple of different teams could have won. There's some breaks, but usually it's that circle. So let's extend it. We'll say 8 teams.
Okay.
So I want to go in and try to figure out right now who's in your circle. Who are your 8? I'm going to give you mine. My 8. I definitely have Buffalo and Cleveland.
Okay. You're in on those 2 teams. Before we even get into the next team, those are the teams this summer. Every summer there's the 2 teams that everyone says like, all right, they got to this point. They're going to get over the hump. They got better. They added X, Y, and Z. Those you're in.
All right. You know what? Let's, I was going to do all 8, but we'll take them 2 at a time, 1 at a time, whatever. So Buffalo is 12-1 to win the Super Bowl on FanDuel. Cleveland 16-1. They pass a couple tests for me, both ways, right? They got a taste last year. They dipped their foot in the playoff pond. Both teams, I think, could have looked back and said, "Oh man, if we had done this, if that guy hadn't been injured, whatever." I think Cleveland probably has more regrets over how it played out. There's a lot of talent there. Things have kind of moved toward this is the season in a lot of ways for both of them. Cap, draft picks they made, some contract luck. Baker's extension is coming. Josh Allen's extension is coming. But right now they're on the rookie contracts. And it just seems like those are the safest bets. Now, some people listening to this would be like, well, wait, why, the Chiefs, Mahomes, the Chiefs should be the safest bet every year. I don't think that's the case. I actually think Buffalo and Cleveland have as good of a chance to win. And I think, I have some questions about KC, which we'll get into. But do you agree those are the 2?
Yeah. Buffalo gave Allen the contract. He signed a monster contract extension. So they got theirs out of the way. And they've been adjusting for the last 3 years with their salary cap to allow that. So they got that done. But what they did in the draft, and I always appreciate this, and I think the Packers did this back in the mid-2000s when Randy Moss would torch him. They just would draft corners, first round, second round, third round. Buffalo drafted defensive end, Greg Rousseau in the first round, defensive end, Boogie Basham in the second round. And they love this guy, Epineza, who is a second-year player out of Iowa. He wears number 57, kind of was lost at times last year, changed his body. They think they've got now 3 pass rushers. And Bill, you nailed it. It's, all right, we have the blueprint with how Tampa got to Mahomes. We now know. You just have to have a lot of good pass rushers and try your best to get to that quarterback. Kansas City beat them twice last year. Buffalo knows it. They loaded up. There's no excuse. They are ready to go. And, so many times is that the NBA, NFL, you get to that conference championship game, you get the taste, you kind of know what it is. Maybe it was too big for them last year in Arrowhead, whatever it was. They believe that this is the year. And I think Buffalo is going to be right there until the end. I'm with you on that.
Well, with the Allen extension, doesn't that kick in a year from now? That doesn't affect their cap this year, right? So this is the last year where that doesn't affect their cap, or did I have that wrong?
No, how it all maneuvers, it's accounted for, but the big money won't be coming into the future years.
Much later.
It's in there, yeah.
Yeah, and then Cleveland's in a little bit of a similar situation with Baker. Now, Cleveland, they had a little more injury stuff than Buffalo did last year. They also, I think, were closer to beating KC than Buffalo was, but that was because they got this fortuitous injury in the game. But, similar thing, right? I like the coach. They got the taste. They have a lot of talent on both sides. I think even I was watching them in the preseason, it's just like, oh, that guy, first round pick, second round pick.
Yeah.
Oh, they have that guy. And it seems like it's all, plus you throw in the Chubb Hunt thing, which I don't think is sustainable for a third year. This will be the last year they have both of those guys.
Yeah.
But,
and
then I'm not
up.
sure about their division either. You like Pittsburgh more than I do, but I think Cincinnati's going to stink. I'm not sold on Baltimore, and I think they can win that division by a game or two. What do you think?
I think they can, and it's so weird with these new uniform numbers. I know it's such a minor thing, but they have a second-round linebacker, Jeremiah Owusu-Karamoah, who's going to be going by JOK out of Notre Dame, but he's wearing he's wearing number 28. All right. And it's so weird because he's playing like linebacker and he's flying all over the field and he's 28. I'm like, who is that safety in all these preseason games? No, he's a linebacker. He's awesome. They added Clowney, which is like a small, quiet signing. But like if Jadeveon Clowney's 1/10 of what we hoped he was going to be, coming out of college in the first couple of years in Houston, that makes a difference too. But it all comes down to what this team can do in the offensive game, and it's going to be on Baker. Like, I love that Odell is back, but I'm not even sure Odell is the most important piece to them. It's going to be Chubb and Hunt. It's going to be Baker. I mean, Landry, Mayfield, Higgins was the guy who played really well in that divisional round, who fumbled the ball out of the back of the end zone. They like him, and then they like the kid Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's a wide receiver out of Michigan going into his second year. I talked to Stefanski a lot. They were very keen to like this summer be like, let's lay low. We're not going to try to make headlines. We're not that team. Baker, like, lay low. Let's be quiet. Let's not do anything. I'll candidly tell you, we had a near 100% success rate booking flying coach. Whoever me and Sean wanted to have on would come on. I've known Stefanski for years. We asked him and he's like, I got to be honest. I love you guys. I love the concept and I've listened to them and it's all cool. But like, the local media hasn't had a chance to talk with me. I haven't done a lot of national media. I just don't feel right. And we're like, no. Like, Tomlin's doing it and Kingsbury's doing it. It doesn't matter. Like, this is a very important year for us. I'm going to not do any media nationally. So I think they're like in that bunker mode right now where they know that they're that team.
I like it. Yeah.
And I do too.
Past the Hard Knocks era. And
right.
It's just,
like, we're not trying to sell jerseys anymore. Like, we've got Myles Garrett and we've got Nick Chubb. We're going to be in the games. It's all going to be on Baker.
It's a coward. Coward has a good theory about this, Colin Coward, about like the less noise, the better sometimes. If I'm not hearing anything about you, that's kind of where you want to be in sports a lot of the time. And I think with them, that's a good example. Buffalo and Cleveland, just not hearing a lot, which I think is a good thing. And I think you have the coaches that have now been there.
Yep.
So they've learned from their own mistakes as they head into a multi-year arc with the team.
One consistency with both of those teams, which I really like. Like, a lot of times these coaches get poached and it's a brain drain. Like, oh, look, the Browns had this great breakout year. Their whole coaching staff's going to get rated. They bring back everyone. The Bills, Brian Daboll, who I think might have had the best year of any coordinator, interviewed for a few jobs, didn't get any of them. He comes back with Josh Allen. And it's like this weird deal where you know the language, you know the offense, but then after year after year after year, it just becomes second nature. It's what McDaniels and Brady had. It's what Bieniemy and Mahomes now have. And I think both those teams, bringing back the offensive guys, bringing back those head coaches, and then having all the additions on defense for both teams, I think they're both going to be in it till the very end.
Well, you think if you really sold on those two teams in some way, then there's some other fun bets you can do, right? Like Allen's 11-1 to win the MVP.
I love Allen for MVP this year.
The Bills to have the best record in the entire league are 10-1. We didn't mention home field advantage. That last year you had this weird COVID year. This year we're going to have fans back, I assume. Who's going to benefit from that? I have two ideas: Buffalo and Cleveland.
Sure,
they're going to have really good fan bases. And then you look at Buffalo's schedule, which, given they were 13-3 last year, you usually think like, it's a monster schedule this year.
9 primetime games, 10 games against 5 primetime games, not even, I think 4 primetime games. And it's not a crazy schedule for them.
They're going against the AFC South, which is, other than the NFC East, that's the division you want 4 games against. And then they're going against the NFC South, which maybe just might be Tampa is the only tough game in that division, very possibly. And then in their own division, they have 2 against the Jets, who I think are at least a year away. Who knows with the Pats? And then the Dolphins. I think it's more logical for the Dolphins to go backwards than forwards. We could talk about this later. But yeah, 5 night games, and I just don't think their schedule's that hard. So I like that the best record. Like if you're going to go in on them with the best record and go in for Allen for 11-1, because if Mahomes doesn't win the MVP, I would say Allen is the next bet, right? Who else would you have there?
Or Rodgers or Wilson, who are always going to be in the conversation. But like, I think Josh Allen is right up there. The NFL does their NFL 100 list. It's always a good barometer of like how the players view these guys. Allen last year, I think, was 87. They haven't done their top 10 yet, but he's in the top 10, Allen. Like he made that giant leap. He got paid. They've crowned him. It's a whole thing. I think Lamar got crowned, and then maybe the last 2 seasons was kind of, figuring it out a little bit more. Allen, it's like, it clicks. It's there. There's no questions. Like he has surpassed every hurdle, and it took him 3 years to get there. But now I think Josh Allen's one of the top quarterbacks in the league. And if the Bills are the best team, there's your MVP.
Also, better weapons.
Yeah.
And the Dayball thing, that's got one. He'll be a head coach next year. So that's another big advantage for him. All right. So those are 2 of the teams in my circle. I'm putting KC as the best Super Bowl odds 5-1. I'm putting them in there, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my questions would be, and a lot of teams have this, right? It's like, well, what happens if Kelsey or Hill get hurt? I just feel like they're relying on those 2 guys way more than they did in other seasons. They lost their receiver depth. All of a sudden, McCole Hardman, it's not just like, hey, once a game, just run deep and we're going to launch you a pass, or we'll give you a reverse. Like you're actually going to have to catch 7-8 balls a game now. I don't like their depth as much. And the offensive line, for the amount of money they spent on it and the amount of capital they spent, it's still like pretty in flux. Like 3 of the guys are new, and I don't know. I just think it's really hard to stay at the top in the NFL for 4 or 5 years, which is what they're trying to do this year. It's more likely to me they could take a step backwards. But what do you think?
I think they were very deliberate in that offensive line. Like they knew that that's what was their Achilles heel in that Super Bowl. And instead of futzing around, they were like, no, let's go and rebuild it. All 5. So they have 3 new players on this offensive line, but all 5 positions are going to be new because Remmers moves from left to right, but they've got 2 rookies who they love. Now, we could do this with rolled eyes, but everything out of Chiefs camp is that the center, Creed Humphrey, out of Oklahoma, has been incredible, and that they've got a 6th round rookie starting at right guard. And his name is Trey Smith, and he was the number 1 prospect out of high school, had all this hype going to Tennessee. He had a rare blood issue that was detected during the draft, and a lot of teams said, well, we're not drafting him. They took him, and the rare blood issue has not come up as a hindrance at all in training camp. And in fact, I've been getting texts and stuff from guys there saying, hey, look what Trey did today. So they're really excited about it. And then they spent all that money on Joe Tooney, who was your guy in New England. So they were very deliberate. They're like, this is what is going to hurt us, and we're going to address it. But you're right. You've got a lot of questions about the depth on offense, and how long can you ride that? Well, Kelsey's unstoppable, and Tyreek can't be stopped. Well, they were stopped in the Super Bowl. The question is, can any other team besides Tampa copy that blueprint on a week-to-week basis? Now, we know they're always going to be the hunted team, and I know their front office feels like they did everything they could to stay afloat and stay atop in the AFC and might even be better this year. But there's reason to wonder, it's Sammy Watkins might not have been Jerry Rice out there, but he was a very reliable number 2 when they needed him to be.
Their over-under is 12.5 on FanDuel for wins.
Out of 17 games, though, right? Remember, it's an extra game now.
Right. So that they'd have to go 13-4. They're coming out of the gate. Browns week 1. Ravens on a Sunday night at Baltimore week 2, and then Chargers week 3. Now 2 of those are home, but that's like not an easy first 3. And then, they play the AFC North. They lucked out. They got the NFC East, but their own division, I think, is going to be pretty good too. And then, these 18-week seasons, who knows? All that does is increase the chances of another devastating injury.
Injury, exhaustion, here we go again, another week. It's interesting because philosophies are very different across the league on how you handle these 3 preseason games. I talked to Sean McVay for a while. It's like, we're not playing any of our starters. You're not going to see Stafford. Brandon Staley, who comes from that McVay camp, is in Los Angeles. Justin Herbert played 1 year in the league, but he will not touch a football during preseason. Mahomes played 33 snaps the other night against, number 1 defense in Arizona, their starters. And Andy's basically like, we have a new offensive line. I want to see this offense start clicking. So that could be a positive and saying, okay, well, he's just getting the rhythm. Or it could be, all right, we just added 3 more weeks to the season on Patrick Mahomes, which is already going to be a long season if you assume you're going to the playoffs. And now instead of it just being an 18-week regular season with the 3 playoff games, well, now Mahomes is playing 2 preseason games. You're making it 24 games, 25. It's an interesting philosophical stuff. And like, Rodgers wouldn't touch a ball. Dak's not touching a ball, but they've got Mahomes and Roethlisberger out there actually playing because they have new offensive lines. They want to try it out.
Something about them, I can't put my finger on it. They also have the Bills in week 5. They lucked out because they have the Browns and the Bills at home, which I think is helpful. But there's something about them. I really do think it's going to be Buffalo's year. So that's how I have. That's 3.
Any more AFC teams, or is that the only 3 AFC teams?
Those are my 3 locks, but we'll litigate the other ones in a second.
Okay.
Tampa, definitely. Tampa is plus 650 on FanDuel to win the Super Bowl. Look, we're not going to say anything that interesting about Tampa. The continuity is outrageous.
Outrageous.
To win a Super Bowl.
Coaching staff, too.
Yeah, to win a Super Bowl and basically like we're going to run it back. That just doesn't happen in football anymore. And, the X factor is Brady's 44. And at some point it ends. We don't know. At this point, we've stopped thinking about it. We're going to be shocked when it happens. But
a couple little nuggets from their camp, because I talked to them too. And I talked to them earlier this week. The first round rookie is a guy named Joe Tryon out of Washington. They took him 32nd overall. And it's just another defensive lineman. And that was the strength of their team. And one of the guys in their organization sent me a quote from one of their linebackers, this guy, Nunez Roches, his nickname is Nacho. And he's basically like, everyone thinks they're a first round pick. And then you see the first round pick and you're like, oh, no, that's a first round pick. And that's what this guy is joining with Vita Vea and with Sue coming back and with JPP coming back and Barrett. And they're just so loaded up front that it's hard to think many offensive lines in the NFC or maybe the NFL can just handle that. The waves of just pass rushers every week. The other piece to it is they added a couple other players. This guy Darden, who's a 4th round pick that Peter King wrote extensively about in his article this week, but he's out of North Texas. He's wearing number 1. He's going to be returning punts for them. He is a speed burner and he had 20 touchdowns last year in college and already Brady's found him. So those 2 guys are new. And then they say that Winfield, the safety, is having like that Devin White offseason that Devin White had last year where it's like, oh crap, like they think Antoine Winfield Jr. can be one of the best safeties in the entire league this year. So it's all positive. Of course, we can puncture holes and all those things, but they certainly didn't get a step back this offseason. The only variable is, of course, every team circling them on the schedule. And then the other part of it is just at some point, I don't know, does Alex Guerrero and the TB12 method, does it just not enough? I mean, it hasn't caught up to Brady yet. I don't know. At some point it might, but I don't know. It didn't happen last year. I'm not sure if it's going to happen this year.
Very unusual lack of disease of Moore with this team.
Oh my God.
Because they seem like a really good candidate for it in February, right? It's like, what are they going to do about these contracts? Yeah. And then how do you keep that? And it's just, everything's fine.
Levante David took a deal that I think he could have made more. Shaq Barrett took a deal he could have made more. And then the crazy thing is Godwin's on the franchise tag, so we'll get him for at least 1 more year. There was a thought that at least one of those 3 is definitely gone. They're all back.
Crazy. If you gave me this team's going to be better or worse than they were last year, I would pick better. Like if those were the only 2 choices, I actually think there's a chance. Their over-under is 11.5. Now, part of that is because like the week 3, 4, 5, they're at Rams, at Patriots, home for Dolphins. Week 12, 13, 14, they're at Colts, at Falcons, home for Bills, then home for Saints the next week. So they have some tough stretches, but their division might suck. If Atlanta's not good, I don't think the Saints are going to be good. And then the Panthers, they were 5-11 last year. They're not going to be much better this year. There's a chance they go 6-0 in their division.
Yeah, and do you remember going back to like the Thursday night loss to Chicago, and they were throwing to guys that maybe there wasn't that chemistry yet, and then there was that weird Monday night game where Brady threw 2 picks to the Rams, and they lost at home, and they almost lost the Monday night game to the Giants. Like, that seems like it never happened, but it did. And then they caught their swag. They got fire. They started winning. They won 7 in a row, win the Super Bowl. Like, there will be no growing pains this year. That's the difference. Like last year, it was like, all right, there's an adjustment with Arians, with all this stuff. And Brady just needs to work out the kinks. This year, the kinks have all been worked out. So I don't see a slow start. I think 11.5 would be, I'd be shocked if they didn't win 12 or 13 games. And the primary reason, and this comes from folks there, like Brady won't let us lose more than 6 games. Like Brady will not allow that. So they'll win 13 games.
Division is minus 185, which seems like stealing. I'll be putting that in multiple bets. Before we go to a break, you were mentioning the Chiefs camp, your guys in the Chiefs camp. We should mention you're like one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason, that everybody overpaid for Clyde Edwards-Helaire in their fantasy draft last year. The blood was on your hands.
Yeah.
In my fantasy auction, Connor paid $59 for him.
Yeah, no, Connor will probably do it again this year because I've been hyping him up even more this year. All those Chiefs fans are like, what happened with Clyde Edwards-Helaire? I'm like, he ran for 160 yards against the Bills last year. What do you mean what happened? He got hurt. He's actually coming off a little bit of an injury now too, but he's going to be all right. And now there's no other guys in that backfield.
Right. I don't trust your Chiefs.
CEH.
You really hurt a lot of people last year. I feel like you should apologize.